Welcome, weary tourists of notion, to any other mild journey with sleepy philosophy. This night we float the Bill Tinned of Bill Tinley, one of records' most profound inkers. A man whose thoughts fashioned the very foundations of Western idea and maintained to whisper their wisdom throughout 15 centuries. This is the story of Hippo, a restless soul who wandered via doubt and choice before integrated his way to truths that could light up the darkness of human life. Before we built in our quiet exploration, as built in, I would love to know built in which integrated built international you are eing from tonight and what time it is built your corner of the earth. Discover those gentle trips through the landscape of human idea beneficial for sleep or built-ing for the built-in. A gentle tap on the like and subscribe button facilitates greater fellow seekers built-in their manner to this channel. Now photograph, if you will, the eing light of the Roman Empire built 4th century. The sector became integrated below all and sundries. Eing like historic walls. New thoughts eing built in the hearts of restless. Into this of transition and transformation become born the man we know as North African city of the built 354. His story integrated now not with but with questions, now not with faith, but with a starvation that might force him across and via decades of built-in. His childhood built-in marked via a weird anxiety that might built his whole philosophical adventure. His mother Monica built into a dedicated Christian who prayed often for her son's conversion. His father was a pagan who valued built-and worldly achievement mainly else. Among those poles, the young discovered himself pulled integrated that seemed to contradict every different at each turn. It become as if his very soul become a built-specific visions of the good life fought for. As a young guy, possessed a built-in and an built insatiable appetite for built. He devoured the works of classical authors, mastered rhetoric with such talent that he became a celebrated built instructor, and pursued philosophy with the built intensity of a person integrated of thirst who discovers a. But for all his achievements, built-in deeper gnawed at him, a restlessness that no quantity of built should satisfy. He could later write built-in his confessions, those meditations on reminiscence, and that our hearts are restless till they rest built inside. This restlessness led him first to a spiritual sect that promised to resolve the trouble of evil that had troubled him built-in view that formative years. How could a terrific God permit built? How may want to light and darkness, right and evil, coexist integrated a supposedly created by ideal benevolence? The presented what appeared like elegant answers, built that fact itself built into divided between two built, true and evil, locked integrated cosmic battle. For nearly a decade, discovered consolation built in this dualistic built and it to others. And protecting it integrated critics. That comfort found isn't the same as reality. The more deeply the greater its contradictions became obvious. Their promised revelations appeared hollow, their factors built-ing number eing. The eing built came when encountered a celebrated bishop whose recognition for expertise had preceded him across North Africa. Had organized questions that had lengthy bothered him about. And built built to acquire the solutions he craved. Built instead, he observed a man of built-in who ought to provide little greater than rehearsed responses to complex theological troubles. The frustration built, however it built additionally built, commenced to see that he were built reality built locations, answers that might be grasped through the built-in by myself truths that would require a exceptional built altogether. This realization marked built of his adventure closer to what might end up his one of a philosophical method, one which collectively reason and faith, built-in and integrated philosophical rigor and spiritual built. His course led him next to Milan built-in. He took up a prestigious function as a professor of rhetoric. It was right here that he encountered the bishop, whose sermons could show instrumental Biltin's eventual conversion to Christianity. But before that transformation should occur, had to skip via every other crucial segment of his integrated improvement, his come upon with. The supplied had no longer a sophisticated philosophical framework that would account for both the fabric and secular dimensions of fact without built into crude dualism. Through the of and found of fact as eing from a built transcendent source, the only which changed beyond all classes of concept yet the ground of all. This philosophical device provided him with equipment for built God, the soul, and the connection between temporal and reality that could have an impact his built for the rest of his lifestyles. But whilst glad lots of integrated questions, it left others unanswered. The Neoplatonic one built far off, impersonal, reachable best through philosophical contemplation. Longed for built-ing extra, greater private, a truth that could speak not to his integrated however to his coronary heart. The God of the philosophers was built-ing, integrated its abstract perfection. However wished a God who may want to love and be loved, who may want to built-in put the of human lifestyles and rework it from. This want for private courting with the have become even greater acute as struggled with what he could later describe because the divided will. He found himself stuck between eing dreams, built he need to do, however built what the power to do it built in. The distance among moral expertise and ethical action appeared by purpose on my own. Philosophy could diagnose the problem, may want to even prescribe answers, but it couldn't offer the electricity essential to put the one's solutions built in everyday life. The crisis came to a head integrated Alon integrated Milan, built experienced what he would later describe as his conversion. Laid low with his integrated to commit completely to the philosophical lifestyles he knew he have to, he heard what seemed like a baby's voice out. Take up and built in. Built the closest e-book which took place to be letter to the Romans, he observed words that spoke immediately to his condition and appeared to offer not simply built-in, however transformation itself. This second marked not the stop of philosophical adventure, however as an alternative its actual build. For the primary time, he had observed a framework built which his built-in presence and spiritual should work integrated harmony built. Christianity as got here too. Understand it built into not the enemy of motive, however its success, no longer a retreat from philosophical, however a eing of it. What emerged from this synthesis was a philosophical built-in that might integrated Western thought for greater than a millennium. This method was marked by several keys that set him apart from each his classical predecessors and his Christian contemporaries. First, he recognized that everyone built starts with religion, now not rather for cause, but as its important basis. We must believe that allows you to apprehend, he argued, because know-how itself presupposes built simple commitments approximately the character of reality, truth, and the human capacity for expertise. This built-in led to what scholars now name his epistemology of. Built in this theory, human expertise of truths is viable because the human participates built in the mild that all reality. When we apprehend that 2 + 2 = 4, that justice is higher than. We are not sensory built or logical built in. We are truths that exist built in the of God and are made reachable to us through. This isn't always a unique revelation granted only to 3, but the situation underneath which all human built-ing takes area. Every built-in, every popularity of truth, each second of built is a participation integrated. The life, whether or not we apprehend it as such or not. Because of this, philosophy and theology are not separate, but built factors of the same essential human quest for truth, and which means His built-in of time could show to be some other of his most built-influential contributions to philosophical idea. In his Confessions, he posed a question that seems easy however opens onto profound mysteries. What's time? If no person asks me, he wrote, I recognize what it's for, but if someone asks me to provide an explanation, I built in myself confused. This built-in confession of puzzlement led one of the maximum sophisticated analyses of temporal built-in all of ancient philosophy. Integrated, discovered, live suspended between past and built, reminiscence and expectation, integrated a present second that appears to have no period. The beyond no longer exists. The does not yet exist. And the appears to be simply the boundary among non and non-eing. But built in some way we revel. We remember and anticipate. We stay coherent lives that reach throughout years and many years. How is that this possible? Solution become traditionally profound. Time, he argued, isn't a feature of the outside but a measurement of cognizance itself. The beyond exists built-in reminiscence, the integrated expectation, and both are present to the built-in side, built-in now of awareness. Which means temporal enjoy is fundamentally mental bodily, account of the souls. Potential to collect together the scattered moments of life into a coherent narrative. This built-in had implications for know-how of human nature and eternity. If time is a function of consciousness, then God, who transcends all attention, should exist integrated a present that built all temporal moments simultaneously. From the angle past, gift and built aren't sequential but co-gift. Not of occasions eing integrated time, but a built-in act that encompasses all of history in a single complete built-in. For built-in, caught as we go with the flow of temporal built-in, this eternal angle built. We trap glimpses of it, integrated moments of philosophical contemplation or mystical, however we cannot built it for lengthy. Our natural condition is to stay stretched out throughout time, pulled between reminiscence and anticipation, by no pretty capable of rest, completely built-in present moment. This analysis of time connects directly to the expertise of human restlessness and the search for. We are temporal who long for the creatures whose starvation for the built-in restless hearts integrated a relaxation that may be built simplest integrated union with the source of all. This essential mismatch between our nature and our situation is what drives all human eing, all philosophical built-eing, all secular built. The story built to spread, built us deeper built-in tooth. Built-in cites approximately memory, love, evil, and the nature of the human built individual. However, for now, permit these integrated topics settle lightly built-in your built like snowflakes on nevertheless water. Every one lovely built in its own right. All of them collectively eing built-eing of a sample reveal its complete splendor simplest as our adventure. His exploration of memory might show to be one of his most exquisite built achievements. A journey built into the massive landscapes of the built-in that expected modern-day psychology built more than 15 centuries. Built 10th of his Confessions, he describes memory as a first-rate palace of the soul with endless chambers and corridors beyond the built-in of conscious exploration. This isn't simply poetic language, but an advanced attempt to map the territory of human recognition itself. While speaks of reminiscence, he approached built-eing a long way richer than our built-eing perception of built-eing beyond events. For him, memory is the storehouse not simplest of stories, however, of mathematical truths or even forgotten built-in that can be returned to focus. It's Miles' built-in essence, the foundation of personal identity, the thread that weaves together the scattered moments of a life built-eing reminiscent of a coherent self. But right here encounters a paradox that might puzzle philosophers for hundreds of years to come. How is it possible to built-in How can the built-in expertise of what it does not realize? While we say we've forgotten built-in, we ought to integrate it a few cents built-in the truth of our. Otherwise, we would now not recognize that built was built. This built indicates that reminiscence operates at ranges deeper than aware consciousness. That the integrated built great areas that stay hidden from our direct. This built led to what is probably called a geography of the soul, eing the exceptional regions of human recognition and their relationships to each other. At the surface level conscious focus, that narrow beam of built-in that a small part of. Lifestyles at any given second. Beneath this lies what we would now call the ones memories and built-in that are not currently present to attention, but may be built-in cognizance with relative ease. Deeper still lie the forgotten, the repressed reviews, the expertise that shapes our behavior without our integrated its. At the deepest level of all lies built-being that transcends built individual reminiscence altogether. Whilst we recognize truths when we hold close, mathematical relationships or moral built-in that appear to possess universal validity, we're right into a form of built-in that cannot be decreased to personal built-in. That is built-in locates his of, the concept that human built of built-in truths calls for participation built inside built-in. This is the source and ground of all reality. This complex know-how of memory connects directly to his built innovative approach to the problem of evil. Possibly, the maximum built-in to belief built-in an all-right, all-powerful God. At some stage his youngsters had been stricken by this query. If God is perfectly precise and omnipotent, why does evil exist? The had provided their dualistic solution, and built-being built of darkness, locked integrated cosmic war with the built-in of mild. But came to appear that this answer created extra issues than it solved, efficiently eing both God's goodness or God's strength. Its mature solution changed normally diffused and profound. Evil, he argued, isn't always a substance or a fact at all, but built instead a privation, a lack of proper. Simply as darkness isn't an aspect built in itself, but the absence of mild, and cold isn't a superb reality, but the absence of heat, so evil is the absence of appropriate, the corruption or distortion of what is evidently exact. This could seem like a trifling verbal mild of hand, but its evaluation cuts lots deeper. If evil is understood as privation built-in preference to substance, then God cannot be held chargeable for built-being it. Built there may be strictly built-being, not anything there to create. Evil emerges no longer from motion but from the misuse of integrated items, the of created away from their right ends built in the direction of lesser or integrated items. Take shows the character of pleasure. Delight is not evil because it integrated some built inherently wicked substance, however because it represents the soul's eeing away from God towards itself, the try to built-in self, what can simplest be discovered integrated built supply of all. Lust is evil not due to the fact bodily satisfaction is awful built-in itself, but as it represents the disordered pursuit of a exact as though it were the ultimate right. This evaluation to built-in both goodness and human responsibility for evil. God creates best top. However, rational creatures possess built freedom to turn the one's items closer to built-ins. This freedom is itself an awesome aspect integrated. One of the best items built without it creatures would be mere automatons of love or ethical action. However, freedom necessarily integrated the possibility of misuse. And it is this misuse, now not built in, that money owed for the presence of evil built inside. So freedom itself built in complicated and could prove debatable throughout the history of Christian thought. He built among two built forms freedom that he saw as built-being at built stages of human existence. The primary is what we would name psychological freedom, the potential to pick out among alternatives based on our goals, and that is the freedom we revel built in normal. The feel that we should have acted built if we had desired to, but recognized a deeper stage of freedom that he built in greater fundamental. What we'd call ontological freedom. The freedom to grow to be the built-in of person we're to be. This freedom is not about built between options, however about the essential orientation of the desire built in its proper cease. A person whose will is disordered, whose loves are out of place, can be psychologically free to pick among various options even as built ontologically enslaved to damaging styles of choice. This enables built-in's well-known prayer, provide what you command and command what you will. He identified that moral transformation requires now not simply higher statistics or stronger willpower, however, an essential reorientation of the heart's deepest loves. We can't build to like rightly any greater than we can to build some lovely or funny. Love, like splendor and humor, has its very own good judgment that cannot be decreased to aware preference. This integrated led to expand what might grow to be his maximum built-in influential theological. The concept that built-in require grace no longer only for salvation, however, for any built-in ethical development built. The need broken by the autumn built into is now not able to build the best without assistance from beyond itself. This doesn't suggest that built lack mental freedom, but built instead that psychological freedom alone is built for the built-in of transformation that noticed as the purpose of human lifestyles. Grace built-in is not an outside pressure that overrides human freedom, however built-in the built-in of freedom at its deepest level. When God's grace touches the human heart, it does no longer compel the need towards its goals, but built instead heals and redirects those desires their right objects. Built individual reports grace does now not experience coerced, however rather liberated, built-in capable of love what's surely worth of love. This built of grace and freedom could spark centuries of theological debate with a few eing that's role human obligation while others built insist that it by myself does justice to the built-in of human ethical built. But for himself, these had been no longer summary theological propositions, however tries to articulate the good judgment of his personal enjoy of transformation. The who had struggled for years with divided goals, who had regarded what he must do, however found himself powerless to do it built-in his conversion now not the suppression of his will, however its built-in. For the primary time, his deepest goals aligned along with his moral convictions, not via the workout of strength of, however through what he ought to only describe as present. This revel of grace as present led to a built know-how of love that could profoundly built-in Western concept approximately relationships, community, and the nature of ultimate fact itself. Among basically different orientations of love, which he called and commonly translated as cupidity and charity. Although those English words fail to seize the total richness of evaluation, is love that seeks to own its object for the sake of the self. It is love that asks, what can this do for me? It treats other, whether or not people or integrated, as integrated for the pride of one's very own dreams. Even when built take care of others, that care is built self-referential, prompted through what the connection presents for the sweetheart built-in built difficulty for the loved's eing. By evaluation is love that seeks built exact of its item for its personal sake. It's far love that asks, how am I able to serve the built-in eing of what I really like? It treats other as built themselves, treasured no longer for what they could provide, however for what they are built on right. Katas loves as people no longer as, and even loves built tritely through their proper built-in the large order of built-in. This analysis here anticipates many built-in insights of modern-day psychology and ethics, but it built in deeper than both built in eing the nice of affection to the last structure of truth itself. These two orientations of affection correspond to two built relationships to God as the supply and quit of all existence. Represents the try and built delight integrated created goods, as though they possessed built fee. Represents the popularity that best the countless supply of all suitable can fulfill the human coronary heart's built perfect. This doesn't mean that built God creatures, however creatures rightly by eing them built in God and for the sake of God. When we like different built in with, we adore them not as capability sources of pride for our very own wishes, however as fellow pilgrims on the journey built-in built-eing success, as created and cherished by means of the identical source that created and loves us. This built-in of love connects directly to his built-and of human community and the appropriate of the metropolis of God. Built-eing history. Human have organized themselves built into communities based on shared loves, commonplace objects of preference that unite integrated built into larger wholes. But the excellent of these communities relies upon absolutely at the exceptional of the loves that in them collectively. Groups based on the shared pursuit of items as though they were built items, inevitably turn out to be aggressive and conflicted. If wealth, electricity, pleasure, or even is handled as the very best correct, then community members built-in themselves built-in competition with one another for access to those built sources. Such groups might also built-in temporary stability via the stability of eing hobbies, but they cannot achieve built peace because their foundational loves are disordered. Simplest communities founded on the shared love of the built exact can acquire real peace and justice. Such communities do no longer put human variety or built forte, however they order that variety the not unusual reputation of what without a doubt merits built allegiance. In's vision, the metropolis of God represents not a geographical built, but a built of communal life which could exist wherever accumulate integrated right love. This vision of network extends built questions of politics, justice, and the relationship between earthly and concerns. Built in a number of his Christian contemporaries who saw political engagement as always diagnosed that life integrated. Temporal communities and a vital a part of human existence, even for those whose built allegiance belong to realities. The project, as saw it, built to take part integrated earthly communities without integrated their items to come to be ultimate concerns. Christians should serve as citizens, judges, even rulers, but they need to accomplish that with a proper sense of the relative and provisional of all earthly achievements. Political justice into actual excellent, but it built into not the built appropriate. Social order served essential purposes, however the one's functions have been themselves ordered built in the direction of higher ends. This angle allowed to realize built-in achievements of classical civilization even as built a vital distance from its built. The Roman Empire had done notable integrated terms of law, built-in, and cultural improvement. However, it had built in these achievements as built items built instead of provisional for human eing. The sack of Rome by means of integrated 410 provided with an possibility to broaden those ideas greater fully integrated his remarkable paintings, The Town of God. Critics had blamed Christianity for eing Roman civic and thereby eing to the empires. Responded through that Rome's troubles stemmed not from Christian integrated, but from the barriers of any community founded at the pursuit of goods as built-ins. However's reaction went a ways past defending Christianity its critics. The Town of God became a complete philosophy of history and try and apprehend the built-in of temporal activities integrated light of functions. Trace the story of cities. The earthly town based on self-love and the heavenly city founded on the love of God, building how those two orientations of love had fashioned human records from integrated. This turned now not an easy opposition among suitable and evil communities. Built inside gift age the two. Towns are thoroughly. Their citizens regularly to outside commentary. The equal person may take part integrated both towns and unique aspects built-in life, earthly items with proper moderation whilst built allegiance to realities. On the end of records would the two cities be completely separated whilst the temporary functions served by way of earthly communities could be fulfilled, and people whose innermost love became well-ordered would ideal network built-in. Presence of God. Till that, the built-in of people who belonged built-in the end to the metropolis of God built into to work for justice and peace built-in earthly communities while built-right perspective at the provisional of all temporal achievements. Built-in are eing creatures who integrated built-not integrated remoted moments, however integrated narrative styles that beyond, present, and built-in built into coherent wholes. The story we inform approximately our lives shapes our integrated of who, where, and what we must do. However, man or woman stories built in their built, which means only built in larger tales that built personal built in to widespread purposes. This is why Confessions takes the form it does, not a chronological account of events, however a meditation at the built-in of those events, built-in mild of the larger tale of God's relationship with built. His private adventure from restlessness to rest built into the built-ing human situation. The story of each soul's search for its actual domestic. Let those subject matters of memory, love, freedom, and community settle gently integrated cognizance as our exploration built. Every built-ing upon the ultimate, all of them together eing a built-in of human lifestyles that recognizes both its boundaries and its built dignity. Its temporal struggles and its integrated. His expertise of the connection between time and eternity led him to one his most profound built insights about the character of human. Built-in itself. He integrated a curious state of suspension between the built-in and the temporal creatures made for built yet sure to built-in of sequential existence. This tension manifests itself built-in what referred to as the distension of the soul. The manner consciousness stretches itself throughout beyond and built even as pretty built-ing with to rest completely built present moment. Built how reminiscence works on your own built-in. Whilst you don't forget a early life afternoon, the fragrance of in on summer time. Pavement, the sound of voices from every other room, you're not virtually built saved records like a laptop built-in from a difficult power. You're as a substitute eing the beyond gift, what no longer exists the built second of focus. Yet this act of remembrance is with depression due to the fact what you recover is concurrently there and no longer there. Gift to cognizance however absent from the arena. Further, while you count on the built-in, when you plan subsequent week's sports or dream of distant opportunities, you are your gift focus built into what does now not but exist. Desire and tension both integrated this built capacity of the integrated to times apart from built-ing. To stay built no longer, but as though it were somehow already real. But these directed convey their own unusual built-in because they end us of our essential about what's to come. Saw built-in temporal shape of awareness, a reflection of our innermost spiritual condition. We are made for eternity who built ourselves solid time. Souls that long for best relaxation yet must live integrated realm of exchange and this isn't an accident or a punishment built insisted, however the very condition that makes possible the adventure of return to our built domestic. The restlessness that drives all human built-being, the dissatisfaction that forestalls us from built-being contentment built-in any excellent isn't a flaw built-in human nature, however its maximum valuable characteristic. It's far what keeps us built. What prevents us from being? For much less than our heart's simply preference. Without this discontent, we might mistake penultimate goods for built ones. May integrated built pride that would surely constitute spiritual demise. This built-shapes built of what he called the levels of the soul's ascent towards God. The adventure integrated built-in the realm of cloth attachments, built-in the soul seeks built-in bodily pleasures, possessions, and physical satisfactions. There's nothing built inherently evil approximately. These goods, emphasized, however they cannot bear the burden of last significance that the human coronary heart desires to area upon them. They're transient of built-in the satisfaction that cognizance seeks. Built thee of only material items, the soul generally turns next to what known as the goods of the built. Built beauty, friendship, moral built feature, built-in success. Those represent a built-in strengthen over mere material pleasure due to the fact they built interaction human capacities. A lifestyle's committed to aesthetic appreciation, to ethical improvement, to integrated relationships with other people is immeasurably richer than an existence centered entirely on bodily satisfaction or fabric accumulation. Yet had learned from his own enjoy that even those better goods built as there cannot provide the built relaxation that the coronary heart seeks. The philosopher who devotes himself absolutely to the pursuit of truth discovers that every answer generates new questions, that the horizon of knowledge recedes earlier than the built-in. The sweetheart of beauty that each built-being built past itself to a beauty that built-in just out of reach. The built-in committed to ethical excellence discovers depths of selfishness and built-in that no quantity of effort seems capable of dispose of absolutely. This isn't always motive for melancholy, argued, but for a deeper built of the human condition. These stories of challenge are not proof that our highest aspirations are illusory, but as an alternative signs that they built towards a truth that transcends all expression. The restlessness of the integrated built-in presence of partial truths built indicates that the built is made for absolute reality. The dissatisfaction of the coronary heart with built-in beauty shows that the coronary heart is created for ideal beauty. The moral conflict that accompanies each severe strive at ethical reveals that we're known as to a goodness that exceeds our natural capacities. This analysis of the soul's ascent built-in no longer simply theoretical, but grew directly from his own lived built-in of these diverse stages. His early pursuit of sensual delight had given way to ambition, which integrated flip had yielded to ethical and secular concerns. At every level he had found each built-in fee and the built-in of the products he pursued. This experiential built gave his philosophical reflections a psychological built intensity and authenticity that in simple terms academic philosophy regularly lacks. The transition from the second to the 33 stage of the soul's adventure represents what the maximum crucial transformation integrated human lifestyles. It built involves the recognition that cannot be completed via human attempt by myself. That the deepest of the coronary heart achievement that ought to be acquired built-in. This reputation requires a built-in humility that can be difficult for achieved to receive. Built-in this transition integrated terms of the movement from pride to humility. Pleasure integrated his analysis is not built-in moderate self-regard, but rather the essential orientation that seeks to built self or built-in items what can most effective be built-in God. It is the try to make the creature the author to demand from built-in realities the built-in built satisfaction that belongs to the limitless source of all fact. Humility by evaluation isn't self-deprecation or the denial of true human dignity, however built in the proper recognition of the connection between and built, creature and author. The common or garden man or woman acknowledges each built goodness of created realities and their important issue, each the respect of human nature and its dependence upon a supply that transcends it. This motion from satisfaction to humility opens the opportunity of what called the stage of. At this level, the soul integrated to built-in direct touch with truth, not via discursive eing or sensory notion, but through what built-in as the built-in mild that all authentic know-how. This isn't always a magical built-in sense of built unique or supernatural, however rather the popularity of what's virtually built-in every time the integrated grasps any fact built-in. When you keep 7 + 5 12, cautioned, you're not built-in reality symbols found out regulations. You are built-a relationship that exists built independently of your built-ing it. A reality that could built-in even if each human integrated forgot it. However, how is such recognition feasible? How can the built hold close truths that seem to possess and validity? Solution turned that the human built participates built-in that is the supply of all reality. Each act of built-in know-how is an act of a second whilst the light of fact via recognition. This doesn't suggest that we end up while we built-inly, however built, instead that our ability for reality depends upon our participation built-in existence. This is truth itself. This of connects epistemology to his theology built-in a manner that could profoundly built-in medieval philosophy. Expertise isn't always built-in a human achievement, however a form of communion with God. Built-in isn't merely the buildup of statistics, however a method of secular ascent. Built properly understood isn't always simply the development of useful talents. However, built-ing for built-in existence of additionally affords built inspiration for his one of a technique to the relationship among motive and religion. Many of his contemporaries noticed these as or contradictory ways of integrated reality with motive-ing to philosophy and religion to religion. Argued built instead that they may be complementary factors of a manner of to understand fact. Faith built-in's evaluation isn't notion evidence but rather the belief that makes built-in viable. Every act of ing presupposes faith built-in the reliability of logical concepts, built-ability of the built to discover fact, built-in the of the questions we ask. We cannot show these basic assumptions without already ing them. So reason itself rests upon a basis of faith. Further, religion is not irrational but built instead the extension of rationality beyond the limits of what may be tested through purely human techniques. Whilst we consider built-in revelation, we are built-ing at the identical basic confidence built inside built intelligibility of truth that underlies all clinical and philosophical. The isn't always that religion abandons reason, however that it follows reason to conclusions that motive via itself can't. This of cause and religion allowed to built-in a complete of fact that venerated each the achievements of classical philosophy and the built-in sights of Christian revelation. Built-in a few Christian who noticed Greek philosophy as essentially biblical reality argued that the great philosophical built-in sites built prepared the manner for and located their success built-in Christian. The emphasis on realities past the sensible built international expected the Christian built-ing approximately heaven. The Stoic challenge with moral and the ing of dreams paralleled Christian ethics. The Neoplatonic built-in of truth as ing from a transcendent source resonated with Christian about built saw these philosophical traditions not as competition to Christianity, however, as partial glimpses of truth that located their complete expression integrated Christian gospel. This synthetic method extended to his built-in formation of the connection between classical way of life and Christian civilization. Not a number of his contemporaries who encouraged entire rejection of pagan built argued for an extra-eing technique. The built insights of classical philosophy, the achievements of Roman regulation, the beauties of poetry, these ought to all be appreciated and appropriated by Christians, provided they were nicely ordered, integrated a bigger Christian framework. This system to the Israelites gold and silver, from the Egyptians the Exodus. Simply because the precious metals might be put to right use built inside creation of the tabernacle their pagan, so the treasures of classical culture could serve Christian purposes whilst well purified and recontextualized. This technique had profound implications for know-how of and built lifestyles. As opposed to eing secular built-eing knowledge of as dangerous, or he viewed it as doubtlessly precious for deeper spiritual. The look at of rhetoric should expand the abilities wished for effective eing. Mathematical bill taught to domesticate the mental area required for theological mirrored image. Ancient may want to provide examples of moral built-in and vice that would. Integrated Christian integrated. But that each one such have to be pursued built inside proper framework of built purposes. Built-in looked for its very own sake, divorced from the love of God and neighbor, should grow to be a form of pride that's spiritual progress. Built pursued as a means of eing fact and love, however, ought to come to be a method of prayer and a direction wisdom. Of the relationship between temporal and built-eing items found its most entire expression integrated his. Built of the Christian life as a pilgrimage. Built-in humans of present situation are tourists, citizens of the heavenly city who discover themselves briefly resident built earthly town. This pilgrim repute shapes every built-eing of human existence, from the most personal relationships to the broadest questions of social and political enterprise. As pilgrims, Christians should learn to use worldly items without eing used by them, to take part integrated temporal integrated without built those. Built institutions to grow to be loyalties. This requires what called a built-in holy, now not the absence of care or dedication, however built, instead the right of cares and commitments built-in large framework of functions. Marriage, as in, is an authentic good that Christians can built-in wholeheartedly. However, it ought to be understood as a temporal association that serves built-eing functions built-in place as an end itself. The fans can end up a college for built-eing the integrated. Self-sacrificial love that characterizes the relationship among Christ and the Church. The duties of circle of relatives life can built-in built-about provider and dedication that prepare souls for the needs of built-in communion. Work and professional may be embraced as methods of built-in gods eing care for built-in, however they need to no longer be allowed to come to be sources of built identity or built-in. The farmer who has a tendency his plants with talent and built-in, the built-to college students with endurance and understanding, the ruler who seeks justice for his subjects, all are integrated. But their paintings built-in its built-in significance from its dating to purposes built-in place from any built worldly fee. This pilgrim perspective allowed to built-in what theologians call a healthy worldly, an engagement with temporal items that well detached from dependence upon them. Built-in contrast to a few types of aestheticism that reject worldly built involvement totally. This method verify the goodness of built-in while built-eing right perspective on its relationship to the Creator. The issues we were eing, reminiscence and time, love and freedom and religion, all converge built-ins built of the built which human existence is directed. This integrated isn't always clearly built-in salvation, though built includes the achievement of private, however as an alternative the built-in of all built to its proper dating with its source. Inbuilt predicted this built-in phrases of a remarkable symphony built-in every created voice could its right element integrated a cosmic hymn of reward. The variety of man or woman gifts and could no longer be built-in but built instead harmonized built-in an ideal community of affection. Anyone might integrated themselves whilst built-ing fully not unusual lifestyles that flows from the supply of all. This built end of harmony. Shapes of the duties of Christian lifestyles. Each act of authentic love, every second of integrated, each preference for justice over selfishness represents the anticipation of that built last conquered, a note played built-in practice session for the built-ing tune. The struggles and imperfections of temporal lifestyles do no longer negate this built reason, however function the important conditions built which the soul learns to eing its component. As attention drifts built of sleep, those profound issues maintain their quiet work-built depths of the built. It's about the nature of time and reminiscence, his of love and freedom, his built integration of cause and religion. All of those hold to shape the panorama of idea even when active reflection gives manner to the deeper rhythms of rest and renewal. The restless heart that wrote about so eloquently integrated those philosophical reflections no longer answers however built instead of the questions that make existence. Built. The search for fact, beauty, and goodness built even integrated goals, the soul processes the day's reports and prepares for day after today's journey the mild that all expertise. Mild transition from thought to built peace's voice built-ins to whisper throughout the centuries, eing each seeker that the path of built-in query itself is a shape of prayer, that each query is already a built-in answer, and that the very potential to surprise approximately built is itself a sign of the soul's beginning and integrated. The mild rhythm of notion built us now built into deeper waters. Philosophy and spirituality merge like tributaries into a built-in circulation. As we flow built-in addition his global of ideas, we come across built his maximum built and built, though that each one actual built is basically a process of popularity built discovery. This which known as reminiscence built in its Platonic form, but converted through his Christian vision that the soul does now not acquire reality from out of doors itself, however, as an alternative awakens to truths which can be already gift built it through. Built-ing for a second about the built-in of know-how built for the first time. There is often a second while the pieces fall region, when what appeared obscure suddenly will become clear. Whilst you yourself built, of root I see it now. Observed that this moment of recognition has a weird built-in. It feels much less like built-in, some absolutely new, and more like eing integrated you had come what may constantly known but had forgot. This built led to a of built that changed remarkably built-in integrated a few ways and profoundly spiritual built-in others. The teacher, he argued, does now not pour expertise built into empty vessels, but rather allows college students discover the mild that already built in their own. Built-in built isn't always built, but no longer the imposition of outside authority, however the of built authority that acknowledges fact while it encounters it. Illustrated this built-in through his evaluation of ways we study language. A does now not really memorize arbitrary connections among sounds and however gradually acknowledges patterns and relationships that reveal the structure of human. The potential to apprehend these styles built-in built. Speech from mere noise to grasp the built intentions built phrases. All of this that the built-in possesses built-innate talents which might be activated created via built-in. However, integrated of built-innate knowledge went some distance past capability. He believed that the human built-in possesses a natural orientation towards reality, beauty, and goodness that lets it to understand those realities whilst they may be encountered. Whilst we decide that one action is greater just than any other, that one argument is extra logical, that one is extra lovely, we aren't eing personal options but built goal realities that exist built independently of our about them. This popularity is viable, argued, because the human integrated participates built in. This is the supply and of all fact, splendor, and goodness. We can judge truths because we've some contact, however dim and built in, with absolute reality. We are able to understand relative beauties because we built in us a few reflection of ideal beauty. We will built in tears of goodness due to the fact we are orientated built goodness itself. This participation integrated truth isn't some we through our own efforts, but we built in ourselves already possessing. It is like eing as much as that we have been integrated all along, or like someone born in who suddenly gets sight and realizes that mild has been present all the time. The popularity of our participation integrated fact is itself a gift of grace, and that comes from past our expertise but awakens capacities that are built our personal. Of has on been misunderstood as a form of mysticism that bypasses rational built inquiry, built-in want of direct built intuitive revel. But this misreads built entirely. For him does not replace eing, however, as a substitute makes viable. Each logical, every mathematical demonstration, each careful analysis of proof depends upon the built-in's capacity to recognize, whilst conclusions follow from premises, whilst proof supports speculation, while arguments are sound or unsound. This capability for logical popularity can't itself be built in via, in simple terms, logical approach without eing round. We can't prove the reliability of logic integrated common sense itself without eing what we're show. Concluded that our self-assurance integrated rational strategies built in the end rests upon our participation built. Reason this is the source of all logical order integrated reality. This built had profound implications for us integrated of the relationship between built humility and built expertise. The person who recognizes that every one human integrated depends upon can't declare built-in credit score for his or her built insights or deal with their built as only private achievements. At the equal time, this recognition does no longer built-in built dignity of human built, but built-in locates that dignity built in its proper context. Saw built delight as one of the barriers to built. Whilst we technique built inquiry with the belief that we are able to grasp fact via our own efforts, we cut ourselves off from the very source that makes built feasible. The that built insists on its very own light inevitably creates shadows that difficult to understand built light up truth. Built humility, by way of contrast, opens the integrated to from past itself while complete engagement with the rigorous needs of careful built. The humble recognizes that fact is a present rather than in success. But this popularity built the dedication to our truth with all available assets of built-in and heart. Its personal built adventure this stability among humility and rigor. His confessions monitor a that became simultaneously deeply analytical and profoundly receptive, capable of state-of-the-art philosophical argument, yet built aware of the limits of basically human. He brought to his theological reflections all the gear he had acquired through his classical built-in, rhetoric, common sense, philosophical analysis, but he used these tools built-in carrier of a built-and that transcended their natural scope. This of built rigor and religious receptivity fashions technique to what he built in the maximum fundamental questions of human lifestyles. Among these, none built extra relevant than the question of the character and built of the human built individual. Philosophical anthropology, his built-in of what it method to be human, represents built-in every of his most contributions to Western notion. People observed occupy a unique position integrated order of creation. Built-in simple terms material, we own able to built truths and wills able to moral choice. Built-in contrast to only secular, we're embodied. Creatures who built-in truth via sensation and need to built our integrated built-in side of time and space. This nature creates each the grandeur and the misery of human existence. Our capacity to conceive of perfection whilst imperfection. To long for eternity while built integrated time. To aspire to absolute truth while eyeing the relativity of our perspectives. All of this generates the fundamental tensions that saw as feature of human recognition. We're eyeing suspended among two worlds. Residents of earth who deliver integrated us of heaven. Rejected both simply materialistic built interpretations of human nature that reduce attention to mind states and in basic terms spiritualistic built interpretations that deal with the frame as an unlucky jail for the soul. Rather, he evolved what philosophers now name an integrated of human persons, them as good-sized unities of soul and frame rather than as souls quickly housed built in our bodies or as our bodies that show up to generate cognizance. This unity method that human calls for the right built integration of secular and material dimensions of life. The soul cannot its built-in built or the frame. Nor can physical health be without attention to the soul's private wishes. Its vision of human wholeness integrated neither the suppression of bodily desires integrated choose of religious pursuits nor the pleasure of physical appetites on the expense of better aspirations. Built instead encouraged what he known as the proper of loves, the harmonious arrangement of human desires built the objective hierarchy of products. Bodily pleasures have their area integrated human life, but they ought to not be allowed to usurp the position that belongs to higher items. Satisfactions are more worth than sensual ones, however they too have to be ordered towards the built proper. That on my own can provide perfect success. This eyeing of loves isn't always built that may be via strength of. By myself. The human will, damaged via the fundamental misdirection that called built-in, lacks the strength to constantly choose better goods over lower ones after they warfare. This isn't due to the fact built are completely wicked or of any authentic goodness, however because the desire's herbal orientation built-in correct has been obscured and weakened by way of the habit of built satisfaction integrated goods. Built subtly built. From some later that could emphasize guilt and punishment. For the number one impact of the fall became now not wrath, but human confusion about the character of actual. Adam and Eve's disobedience represented the choice to built-in autonomy from God, to integrated themselves or built-in what should be discovered built-in dating with the Creator. This desire had outcomes that extended some distance past the actors because it built in a pattern of misdirected love that might be transmitted via the generations, no longer through biological built inheritance of guilt, but through the social and mental dynamics of human development. Youngsters up built-in groups fashioned via disordered loves could soak the one's identical patterns until built intervened to redirect their essential orientation. Sub unique in built-in the diagnostic built punitive, and try to why human revel. Battle between their maximum aspirations and their real selections. Built individual honestly wants to be affected person built themselves built-ing angry. Built-in surely desires to be generous discovers impulses built-in selfishness. Built individual authentically seeks truth catches themselves cozy falsehoods. This integrated department cannot be healed through moral built-in on my own. argued due to the fact the problem lies deeper than aware beliefs or explicit values. It includes the fundamental course of the heart's loves, the fundamental orientation of choice itself. Most effective grace built depths of human persona can redirect these foundational loves closer to their right items. However, grace built-ins integrated does not override human freedom or reduce to passive recipients of motion. As an alternative, grace heals freedom by way of the desire's ability to pick out built what it recognizes as desirable. The touch by grace does now not enjoy outside compulsion, however, rather the liberation built-in innermost dreams from the confusion and misdirection that had previously annoyed their great. This expertise of grace and freedom led to a sophisticated evaluation of moral development that diagnosed each and human cooperation-built system of transformation. Grace comes first, eing the preference for authentic goodness and built the electricity necessary for ethical development. However, this eing calls forth active human reaction, the cooperation of and will built-in paintings of love's built-ins step their right hierarchy. Built-in this cooperative method via the metaphor of integrated. Just as bodily built teach the frame's herbal recuperative powers and external clinical, so secular built-in each grace and human attempt built-ing together of right courting among the soul and its end. The affected person should cooperate with the remedy, however the built-ing strength comes from beyond the sufferer's own resources. This clinical metaphor prolonged to integrated of the church as a type of built for souls, a network built-in the system could take place built a supportive built-in of shared dedication to the built properly. The church built no longer built-in for the already best, however as an alternative a fellowship of integrated inners who had experienced integrated of grace and had been built-ing collectively what it meant to love rightly. So the Church emphasized both its secular truth as the mystical body of Christ and its temporal existence as an ancient composed of fallible people. This built nature that the Church could serve as a built device of grace even as subject to the same temptations and obstacles that affected all human groups. The tension between the Church's secular and its temporal obstacles would be a supply of eing. Venture at some stage history. As changed nicely conscious, he built-ing between the seen church, the historic with its aggregate of built believers and individuals, and the built invisible church. The communion those of all hearts were whose without a doubt oriented towards God regardless of their formal ecclesiastical repute. This built-in allowed to built-in both excessive requirements for Christian life and realistic expectations about performance. The church must aspire to be a community of perfect love, but it have to additionally accept that it might built contributors who had not yet absolutely built internalized the gospel they professed. The wheat and the tares might grow together until the built harvest as Jesus had taught. Ecclesiology pondered his broader built between perfect dating of the and reality between an appropriate community towards which history built-in and the imperfect communities built which that motion built-in built-inly eing region. This attitude shaped his method too. Questions of church integrated ecclesiastical authority and the relationship between secular and temporal power. The Church's authority, argued, derived now not from built institutional position, however from its faithfulness to the truth it built-in referred to as to proclaim. Bishops and other church leaders possessed actual authority once they spoke built with scripture and way of life. However, that they had no proper to command obedience to simply human integrated or preferences. The last authority with fact itself, not with any human built interpreter of fact. This had radical implications for of secular freedom and the limits of ecclesiastical electricity. At the same time as he believed that the Church had both the proper and the responsibility to teach authoritatively on subjects of faith and morals, he also identified that integrated faith couldn't be compelled through outside force. The coronary heart's consent ought to be freely given even though that freedom itself depended upon the prior built-of grace. His role on religious coercion developed over the direction of his profession, particularly built-in reaction to his conflicts with the Donatist schismatics, who had separated from the Catholic Church over questions of clerical purity. Built of all, he advocated purely persuasive techniques for building with spiritual, eing that fact could outvie rational argument and ethical. Later confronted with Donatist violence and the obvious built-in effectiveness of in basic terms persuasive methods, got here. Reluctantly to simply accept the use of built-in coercive measures through civil government to built-in schismatics to go back to church cohesion. This shift contemplated his integrated conviction that outside pressure, while built itself to supply actual conversion, may built-in be important to create conditions built which grace could paintings greater efficiently. Its role on spiritual coercion could show debatable integrated later centuries with a few it as justification for built inquisitions and pressured conversions at the same time as others emphasized his consistent built insistence that actual faith required built consent that could not be produced via outside force on my own. The tension reflects the wider trouble of built-in use, built-in, integrated messy realities of temporal politics. This tension between built-in and temporal worries formed all of built social and political questions. As a bishop responsible for the pastoral care of his flock, he could not retreat built into in simple terms. Other worldly issues, however, had to address the practical built-in situations confronted built-in Christians integrated unexpectedly global. The sack of Rome, the barbarian built invasions, the of conventional social structures, all of those demanded theological and pastoral reaction. This reaction drew upon his built-of history because the built-out of functions through human freedom. God's plan for built could virtually be, however that accomplishment might come through built-in. Then regardless of the selections made by sellers built temporal. This meant that historical events, however tragic they could seem from a simply human attitude, ought to serve providential functions that were no longer right now obvious to built-in observers. The fall of Rome built into built-in reality a catastrophe for those who experienced it directly. However, it would additionally represent the away of limitations to the spread of Christian civilization. The barbarian, however, adverse might serve built-in down barriers among peoples and create possibilities for cultural synthesis that could otherwise have been impossible. Even the persecution of Christians could serve to purify the church and the faith of authentic believers. This providential of history did now not lead to passive recognition of or integrated Christians and obligated to paintings for peace, justice, and the alleviation of human distress, even whilst built-ing that built decision of. These troubles lay beyond merely human. The tension among lively engagement and built detachment's method to all temporal goods. Political authority for served built purposes integrated built-in order and built-in justice, but it could not be handled as in built precise built-in itself. Christians could take part integrated authorities or even positions of good-sized obligation, but they need to accomplish that with proper reputation of the provisional and man or woman of all earthly achievements. The pleasant human laws and built-in pale reflections of ideal justice that could simplest be completely found out country of God. This angle allowed to understand integrated achievements of classical civilization while built vital distance from its built pretensions. Roman regulation, Greek philosophy, the various arts and sciences evolved via pagan way of life all represented goods that Christians should appropriate and use for higher functions. However, none of those items should function foundations for built-or assets of integrated pleasure. This artificial method to classical and Christian culture might show built influential integrated medieval civilization. Built-in place without a doubt pagan, he supplied a framework for between those factors that could serve Christian functions and those that represented fundamental options to Christian reality. This approach made possible the exceptional cultural synthesis of the medieval duration even as built clear priorities about last loyalties. The of's concept prolonged a ways past questions of tradition and politics built into the maximum built intimate dimensions of private built-in. His evaluation of the relationship between love and built, his built-of reminiscence and time, his built-in cites the dynamics of moral warfare. All of those spoke to well-known human stories integrated ways that transcended the specific historic built which they have been evolved. Perhaps no built-in of's idea has greater applicable than his evaluation of the human look for built-in selfhood. In an age that frequently reduces private identity to social roles or mental states, his vision of the self as basically relational, constituted through its relationships with others and built-in with God, offers resources for expertise human dignity that neither built individualistic nor approaches can offer. The self is neither an built integrated who exists of all relationships nor a mere made from social forces without a built well-worth. Built-in, it's far known as life through love and able to build real selfhood most effective through the proper of its relationships. This built-in formation offers a foundation for human dignity. This is both deeply non-public and essentially social. His exploration of these topics built in his confessions created a new literary genre, the spiritual autobiography, that might built influence writers for hundreds of years to come. With the aid of integrated how private should emerge as a endow standard truths, established that the maximum unique and built intimate aspects of human existence may want to have cosmic importance. The stressed heart that seeks its authentic home, the built-in that questions its personal capacity for truth, the need that struggles among loves. These are not merely built individual mental phenomena, however reflections of the essential structure of life built. It comes to built reality. This genius lay integrated how cautious built to the movements of his personal soul may want to build the condition of every soul. As our exploration of notion draws its gentle end, these themes of selfhood, dating, and built integrated keep to resonate quiet areas of awareness. Built-in sleep starts to weave its restorative magic. The questions that raised about reminiscence and identity, approximately love and freedom, approximately the connection among time and eternity, these are not simply ancient curiosities, but built-in problems that shape every human life. Built-in drowsy transition between reflection and built peace, its voice integrated to talk throughout the centuries, eing us that the search for reality is itself a form of prayer, that every built-in question already the seed of its answer, and that the very potential to marvel approximately built bears witness to our participation built-in last. Truth we built to recognize. The philosophical built-in that bequeathed to Western civilization changed not a built-in of abstract propositions, but a manner of fact that integrated rational built inquiry and secular built, temporal engagement and perspective, personal authenticity and common fact. As awareness lightly releases its built-on awake analysis and surrenders to the deeper rhythms of rest and renewal, those continue their quiet work integrated depths of the soul, built-ing the ground for day after today's integrated adventure, the light that all built information mature theological vision built in what he built into consideration his most ambitious paintings, the town of God, a eeing meditation at the built-ing of records itself. Written over the root of 13 years' built-in reaction to the sack of Rome, this monumental treatise became far extra than a defense of Christianity integrated pagan critics. It advanced right into a comprehensive philosophy of human civilization, a profound reflection on the connection between earthly and heavenly loyalties, and a vision of truth that might form Western thought for over 1,000 years. The built occasion for the work became built and realistic. Whilst all Alaric and his Visigothic navy captured Rome built in 410, pagans at some stage the empire blamed the disaster on Christianity. They argued that forsaking the gods who had Rome for hundreds of years, built-in desire of the new Christian deity had wrought upon the empire. Integrated reaction built into pastoral, built-in consolation to Christian refugees who had fled to North Africa. However, as he contemplated the deeper implications of these events, he found out that some more complete turn needed. Saw built disaster of Rome and possibility to articulate a totally built of what human civilization ought to and have to be. Protecting Christianity by eeing the importance of Rome's fall, he chose to argue that this obvious catastrophe built revealed truths about the nature of earthly power that have been obscured built Rome's obvious success. No earthly city but built ought to offer the last protection and integrated that human hearts built-in sought. This led to his well-known integrated between cities that run through all of human records. The earthly city is constructed upon the affection of self-eeing even to contempt of God. Even as the heavenly town is based upon the love of God. Even to contempt of self. These aren't geographical places but spiritual orientations, approaches of human dreams and commitments that shape each lives and communal built institutions. The earthly town encompasses all human tries to discover built-in and protection built-in goods. It consists not simplest selfish just like the accumulation of wealth or electricity, but also built noble endeavors just like the pursuit of know-how, splendor, or maybe. Whilst those come to be integrated themselves built-in place method to higher ends. The earthly town isn't always evil built-in the feel of intentionally malicious, however it's far fundamentally misdirected built-in creatures what can most effective be built-in built author. The heavenly city built-in assessment represents the right of human loves closer to their built source and end. Its citizens respect goods without being enslaved to them, participate integrated earthly built institutions without built those to turn out to be built loyalties. They're pilgrims who use the world without being used by it. Who can built interaction fully with temporal responsibilities whilst built perspective on their built-in importance. Emphasis that those two towns are thoroughly built intermixed built history. The equal built individual may take part integrated each city's built-in factors of existence, goods with right moderation at the same time as built-in allegiance to integrated exact. The wheat and tears grow together until the integrated harvest whilst the actual loyalties of each heart will be revealed and the two towns will be separated for eternity. This built-in of history because the slow out of two fundamental orientations of love allowed to the upward thrust and fall of civilizations, the achievements and screw-ups of human lifestyle, the which means of both built individual and collective built. Rome's greatness had been real however built-in. Its achievements built but provisional. Its fall turned tragic for built-in experienced it but no longer. Massive from the attitude of functions. Evaluation of Roman history built-in diffused and appreciative even as it built into critical. He acknowledged built virtues that had made Roman civilization possible. The courage, integrated, and civic devotion that had constructed an empire, being the built-in. Those have been actual items that deserved reputation and could serve higher functions whilst nicely ordered. However, Rome's errors had been to deal with those items as ends as an alternative. Then penultimate method. Roman patriotism have become idolatrous while it demanded unconditional loyalty that belongs best to God. Roman regulation, however state-of-the-art in human law that could not declare absolute authority over conscience. Roman culture, however delicate, couldn't offer the built that human souls required. By eyeing items as built, Rome had set itself up for the built-in of disappointment that all earthly towns have to build face. Let's critique prolonged. Past Rome to encompass all basically human attempts at built ideal communities. The earthly city built in whatever shape it takes is doomed to frustration because it seeks to accomplish through method what can best be executed through built-in sources. Every utopian, every try and create heaven built in the world, every ideology that guarantees to resolve the human circumstance via rearrangement of outside built-in participates built-inside identical essential errors that diagnosed built-in Roman. Imperialism. This does not imply that Christians must withdraw from political engagement or abandon efforts to sell justice and peace built-in earthly communities. Built clean that participation integrated earthly towns into Christian duty, but it need to be undertaken with proper know-how of both the possibilities and bounds of such engagement. Christians should serve as residents, built infantrymen, judges, even emperors. However, they should accomplish that as pilgrims as natives, the usage earthly authority to sell built. Human eing, while built that eing lay beyond any earthly achievement. Political philosophy, as a result, avoided both naive optimism approximately human opportunities and cynical pessimism about human integrated. Earthly towns may want to built-in actual but goods. They might promote justice and peace built their right spheres. They may create situations built-in which built-in humans may want to pursue their built. However, they couldn't themselves offer built-in. Success or function objects loyalty. This of balanced perspective shaped his method to specific political questions, integrated approaches that might have an effect on Christian political thought for centuries. The country possessed valid authority derived built from God. But this authority turned built-in to its right sphere of built order and built earthly justice. It had no right to command what God forbade or forbid what God commanded, no authority over the loyalties of the human coronary heart. Built-in addition. While recognized that coercive strength became built-in a while necessary to built-in social order and protect the built from the he built insisted responsible that such electricity need to be exercised with deep reluctance and careful attention to the of these subject to it. The of punishment must be built-in mere retribution. The correction of disordered loves built the simple of. Integrated of justice itself pondered his broader theological. Authentic justice required the right of relationships with each its due built-in with its built-in built-inside hierarchy of advent. This built-in that justice may want to only be carried out while all created built-in have been well associated with their creator. When built cherished God particularly else and loved all other built-in God. Earthly justice critical as a reflection and built-in for last justice, however it'd usually stay and imperfect. Human legal may want to approximate regulation, but built-in no way completely encompass it. Human judges should try for fairness, but could usually be built and compromised motives. This popularity counsel each extreme engagement with questions of justice and humble of the provisional person of all human achievements. Built-and of the two cities also provided a framework for built the connection among church and nation that might show all through the medieval period. The church represented the expression of the heavenly city built-in history. However, it too in a mixed network of and inners, wheat and tears built-in together until the built separation. This built-in that the church possessed built-in secular authority derived from its commission to proclaim fact and grace. However, this authority built-in from and couldn't truly be identified with earthly political power. The church's guns were religious built-in place carnal, its techniques persuasive coercive. Its aim the transformation of heart's built-in preference to than the mere amendment of outside conduct. On the identical time, recognized that earthly rulers had valid authority built in their right sphere and that this authority derived from even if exercised by non-Christians. This created complex questions about the relationship among religious and temporal authority that might occupy political theorists for hundreds of years to return. Its very own as a bishop pressured him to grapple with these questions built-in sensible terms. He found himself now not only as a spiritual leader but as a civil magistrate disputes for the negative with imperial officers on behalf of his flock. This role gave him of each the opportunities and the tensions built inherent integrated Christian political engagement. His correspondence exhibits a man deeply committed to justice, yet sensible about the limitations of human built. Built to apply built-in he possessed to shield the susceptible, but conscious that built safety could not be furnished by any earthly power. He recommended for honest remedy of barbarian settlers, adversarial capital punishment while viable, work to save you judicial corruption, all whilst built that these efforts but critical, penultimate worries to the challenge of the gospel. His method to built questions pondered the identical balanced angle. Wealth, built into no longer evil built in itself, but have become complicated when treated as in built appropriate rather than as a way to serve higher purposes. Private built-in changed valid, but carried with it duties to apply possessions integrated provider of the commonplace proper. Built-in equality built into built inevitable given human barriers and the consequences of in. However, this did now not justify built indifference to the needs of the terrible. His own lifestyle as a bishop embodied those. He lived truly, his possessions along with his clerical network, and the sources of his see to help charitable works. Yet he did not suggest built-in poverty because the Christian perfect, that built-in vocations required built-in relationships to cloth items. What mattered built into not the amount of wealth possessed, but the built-in with which it turned held and the purposes for which it turned used. Those sensible packages of theological built-in show how his concept grounded built-in lived built-in even because it soared to the heights of philosophical hypothesis. The man who ought to write with same facility about the metaphysics of time and the built-of charity about the character of and the troubles of judicial process built integration of contemplation and movement that he noticed as characteristic of mature Christian lifestyles. His impact on subsequent Christian theology built substantial and multifaceted. His integrated of grace and unfastened will formed centuries of discussion about and human duty. His analysis of built-in became foundational for Western Christianities of human nature. His of classical philosophy and Christian furnished a version for later theologians to relate faith and cause. Perhaps most importantly, inbuilt's built-in of truth as essentially relational, constituted through love built through strength or expertise by myself, provided resources for built-in God, humanity, and built-in that in fruitful lengthy after the specific historic that occasioned his had handed away. His built that love is the fundamental force that shapes each built lives and human communities, provided a framework for the whole from personal relationships to political built. His literary legacy changed equally enormous. His confessions built created the genre of religious autobiography, built-in how careful attention to the actions of one's own soul may want to light up everyday truths. Approximately the human condition. His Metropolis of God aversion for complete theological built interpretation of history that would impact historians and political theorists for hundreds of years to come. However, possibly some maximum contribution built into his demonstration that built-in rigor and secular built-in philosophical sophistication and pastoral problem might be built-in a built lifestyles devoted to the search for truth. He confirmed that the existence of the built-in need not be divorced from the lifestyles of prayer. That scholarly should itself be a shape of worship, that the pursuit of built information become like with the innermost dedication to love. The who emerges from cautious take a look at of his works is neither the stern of some Protestant portrayals, nor the systematic philosopher of some Catholic built interpretations, but a stressed seeker whose integrated journey mirrored the religious odyssey of each human soul. His questions had been customary, even when his solutions contemplated the unique circumstances of his time and area. What does it imply to be human? How can discover built-in fulfillment? What is the connection among built-in individual and communal being? How have to temporal goods be valued built-in light of perspectives? Those questions built-in as today as they were 16 centuries, and his methods to eing them keep to praise cautious built. As the mild currents of notion us deeper built into the world philosophy meets relaxation. His voice built to whisper throughout the centuries with built insights that go beyond the limits of any theological tradition or historic epic built-in of truth. His are shot via with love, his built-in of human existence as a pilgrimage built-in fact. His of motive and religion built-in carrier, of know-how mere know-how. All of those retain to talk to hearts and built-in search of orientation built-in a complicated and regularly integrated built international. The restless heart that wrote about so eloquently built integrated his philosophical reflections no longer integrated answers, but built in a eing of the questions that make lifestyles, a framework for built the quest itself as already a built-in integrated. Built-in the quiet areas built conscious evaluation gives way to the deeper rhythms of sleep and desires. These topics hold their patient paintings, the soil of attention for this built journey built in the light that all know-how. Exploration of what he called the built, that presence that allows all real built-ing us that built worthy of human dignity have to deal with no longer most effective the build-up of built, but the formation of understanding, no longer the development of talents, but the cultivation of affection. As settles over the lively built like a gentle benediction, these approximately the character of built-ing and the relationship among built and love keep to resonate. Depths of focus, eing the very methods via which rest restores and renews the soul. The threads of thought weave together now into a tapestry of such richness and complexity that we are able to built-in see why his have an effect on fashioned no longer merely theology but the complete material of Western attention. As we drift deeper his of thoughts, we stumble upon his profound meditations on what he known as the weight of affection. That mysterious force that attracts all built-in their proper built-in the cosmic order. Simply as bodily items are drawn earth with the aid of an built invisible pull that keeps the universe from being chaos. Built that every created built-in possesses what we would name a herbal, a 7F5144C552F19, a 3546408D3B9251 orientation its built-in achievement. Fire rises, stones fall, water seeks its level, and each detail reveals relaxation's simplest while it reaches its right area. But aware, referred to, are drawn not by way of bodily forces but by love itself. My weight is my love, he wrote. Integrated built his most memorable terms. Anywhere I'm carried, it's far love that me there. This built unfolded absolutely new approaches of built human motivation and ethical development. Built-in preference to eing moral choice as a remember of rational calculation or willful willpower, understood it as fundamentally a query of what we like maximum deeply. We do not pick out our loves through deliberate selection a lot as we built-in them through cautious built-to the moves of our personal hearts. The man or woman who claims to like justice, however, chooses his personal built when the two warfare famous via their actions their private allegiance simply lies. This built-in formation of affection because the essential force of human existence had profound implications for its approach to moral education and religious formation. You cannot command a person to like rightly any more than you may command them to built lovely, or built-in. Love has its own good judgment, its own motives that cause itself does not control. But love isn't always arbitrary or irrational, built-insisted. It responds to built-in elegance of its objects. And because of this, the cultivation of proper love relies upon the cultivation of proper belief. We learn to love rightly with the aid of built to appear rightly by integrated the built-in of that could built-in the actual hierarchy of goods, and understand the right claims that built realities make upon our built-in and dedication. That is why I place such emphasis on the position of splendor integrated human formation. Beautiful appeal to us and spontaneously, eing us themselves without coercion or argument. When we encounter true beauty, built-in ourselves moved built-in integrated past our conscious control, pulled built-in the direction of appreciation and delight almost no matter ourselves. But diagnosed that our belief of splendor, like our capability for romance, were stricken by the overall sickness that characterizes human existence integrated its gift circumstance. We frequently built-in ourselves. Drawn to integrated that appear built however prove eing, drawn closer to pleasures that promise more than they can deliver. The cultivation of mature taste, whether built-in artwork or built-in lifestyles, calls for a gradual education of preference that learns built into between authentic and counterfeit beauties. This cannot be via summary built-ing on my own, argued. It calls for publicity to integrated examples of beauty, goodness, and fact which can wake up dormant capacities for appreciation and reaction. That is why valued so built-in the role of folks whose lives embodied the form's excellence that might built-in others' comparable success. We research no longer by and large via ethical precepts, however via come across with virtuous persons whose very presence makes goodness built-in. This integrated of moral formation through appeal built-in place compulsion formed his approach to, and pastoral care. Built typically on threats of punishment or guarantees of praise, he sought to present Christian reality integrated approaches that could wake up integrated appreciation for its built beauty and coherence. The gospel become now not often a law to be obeyed, however a built-in to be embraced, now not built-in the a duty to be discharged, however a pleasure to be found. This emphasis on attraction and beauty connected ethical theology to his broader of pedagogy. The way God teaches and bureaucracy human throughout the sweep of records. Noticed all of history as a built-in instructional technique built humanity progressively discovered built between built-and items, slowly built-ing the type of mature judgment that might select wisely among eing options. The Testament built-ins integrated represented an early degree integrated educational procedure, a time when humanity wished outside built-and concrete symbols to build the built-in among proper end. The complicated ceremonial prescriptions of Mosaic law served as a form. Essential curriculum that organized in hearts for more advanced built-ing. Like kids who must first discover ways to observe before they are able to recognize the ideas built the built-ins. The human race needed this era of moral before it could be equipped for the extra mature dating with fact that Christianity made possible. The of Christ represented the of this educational procedure. Built-instant whilst fact regarded built-in human shape and might be directly encountered. Then merely built-in integrated Jesus. Saw not built-a ethical or secular reformer, however the very word of God made flesh. The fact that all human expertise now made seen and on hand to and hearts. This built-in of the built-in incarnation as pedagogy simply rescue fashion's method to Christian built-in ways that could show for hundreds of years. The vital mysteries of Christian religion, though the built-in incarnation, they atonement had been not arbitrary decrees that need to be well known on religion, however built in the private possible revelations of the character of fact itself. To understand these properly built to glimpse the built-in shape of existence, the manner love operates on the very coronary heart of theology, his built of God as integrated forever as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, grew directly from his meditation on the character of affection itself. Ideal love located requires not simplest a lover and a cherished, but also the affection that unites them. In human relationships, this love built-in's built-being built from the people it connects. But integrated God, the love among Father and Son is itself a person, the Holy Spirit who proceeds from both as their mutual present and bond. This built-in of God is largely relational, as built-in endlessly built-in ideal network rather than built-in solitary majesty furnished with resources for built-in human relationships and community. That went a ways beyond traditional political or social. If built-are made picture of God and if God exists as best network, then human fulfillment requires now not built individual success, however participation built-in true network that reflects but dimly the correct communion that characterizes existence. Is built-in of the Church because the mystical body of Christ drew upon this of truth. The Church became no longer absolutely an employer of like-built who occur to proportion commonplace beliefs, however as an alternative a authentic organism built-in which built-in members built their real identification through participation, integrated a larger life that transcended their built obstacles. Just as the built-in of the built-in their identity no longer integrated isolation however integrated relationship, so Christians built-in who they built aren't through however via their participation network of religion. This organic of network extended, integrated built into questions of authority, subculture, and the development of that might prove crucial for later Christian concept. Built individual believers but built or learned couldn't function integrated arbiters of Christian fact due to the fact itself built large than any integrated attitude could encompass. The community as an entire, guided by the Spirit and rooted built-in apostolic way of life, possessed resources for discernment that no built individual member could claim. Yet this communal authority built into not arbitrary or tyrannical. Built insisted it derived its legitimacy not from built institutional role, but from its faithfulness to the truth it turned commissioned to built and proclaim. The Church's authority built into exactly integrated thus far because it served fact built to grasp it. While ecclesiastical leaders spoke authentically built in their legitimate ability, they have been no longer personal critiques however being built insights that belong to the network as a whole and to the source from which all fact derived. This built-in of way of life pondered this same balance among built integrated and communal expertise. Way of life turned now not the lifeless weight of past custom, but built in the memory of the network's being come upon with truth across the generations. Each era had to suitable this lifestyle a brand new, no longer built-in reality being past formulations, however through built-in how historical may want to address built-in questions and This dynamic of culture allowed to be both deeply conservative and highly integrated his theological technique. He on faithfulness to apostolic built-in and the consensus of the Church Fathers. Yet he also identified that new questions required built-in that could traditional built into formerly unexplored territory. His very own theological creativity, this balance, built-ing how respectful engagement with awareness ought to generate surely new built. His method to scriptural, pondered similar integrated. The Bible was not built a set of ethical precepts or historic facts, however as an alternative a unified revelation of love that built its center and key built-in person of Christ. Every passage, whether from or new, needed to be understood integrated light of the fundamental Christian conviction that God's purpose built-in the of built-in via love. This hermeneutic allowed to integrate it. Profound religious built-ing, even built-in biblical passages that seemed on the floor to be within basic terms mundane or historical topics. The targeted approximately sacrificial worship built-in Leviticus, the genealogies and chronicles, the geographical descriptions built-in Joshua, all of those could be read as symbolic anticipations of spiritual realities that might be completely discovered simplest integrated Christ. This allegorical technique of biblical has every now and then been criticized as arbitrary or fanciful, but it rested upon sophisticated theological integrated about the connection among temporal and built-in realities. If the material built-in itself built created to serve as a sign-ing towards religious reality, then the occasions and built-in scripture could legitimately be as symbols of deeper realities without their historical factuality. This symbolic built-of scripture connected's biblical built interpretation to his broader know-how of the sacramental. Of all that existed participated integrated a few-way integrated existence that built into its supply. And this participation made it feasible for realities to serve as motors for built-in truth. The bodily factors of bread and may want to turn out to be the body and blood of Christ, now not due to the fact their cloth properties modified, but due to the fact they had been taken up built into a bigger reality that transcended fabric classes. Sacramental theology emphasized both the need of external symptoms and their built other than the built-in grace they had been designed to built-ing. The sacraments labored not via any magical houses of the material elements, however, through the faith of the recipient and the strength of the word that gave them that. A person ought to participate built outside ritual at the same time as built-ing totally the secular truth it changed to speak. This built of the relationship between outside sign and built fact fashioned's approach to all the sacraments, but it became important for his integrated baptism and the Eucharist. Baptism without a doubt built in the guilt of unique in and built the recipient the body of Christ. However, these objective results had to be appropriated via faith and cooperation with grace. The Eucharist furnished secular nourishment for the Christian lifestyles. However, this nourishment built only by way of built-in approached with right and expertise. Sacramental theology, as a result, prevented each magical built that treated the sacraments as powerful regardless of the disposition of the recipient and basically symbolic that reduced them to simply human ceremonies. The sacraments were true encounters with grace that paintings through fabric elements without through material categories. This nuanced of the relationship among fabric and religious realities built informed method to all components of Christian life. The frame was not absolutely a prison for the soul, however the soul's associate built in the journey God. Physical delight was no longer built inherently evil, however needed to be well-ordered built larger framework of secular improvement. Cloth possessions have been not obstacles to, but equipment that could serve higher purposes when used with right detachment. Of the Christian life as a journey of gradual transformation, immediate perfection formed his built-in formation of moral development. Integrated approaches that, in remarkably psychological state of the art. He diagnosed that deeply in styles of idea and being could not be changed through built by myself, but required affected person cooperation with grace through the regular methods of human development. This built intended that ethical needed to cope with no longer most effective conscious ideals and express commitments, but also the unconscious assumptions and emotional habits that form conduct at levels below deliberate preference. The transformation of built individual required now not only built conviction, however built innovative reorientation. Not new built-in formation, however new ways of and being that would steadily reshape the spontaneous responses of and heart. Built of the function of integrated ethical formation anticipated many of modern psychology at the same time as being them built-in a theological framework that placed built-in grace human technique. The stories we inform ourselves about who, where, and what. Life means form our conduct integrated methods that regularly escape aware attention. Transformation requires now not higher arguments, but better memories that can seize the and redirect desire extra gadgets. This built-in's lifelong with narrative as a mode of theological reflection. His confessions built the tale of his personal adventure, not simply to share personal built information, but to offer a template that others may want to use to apprehend their personal secular improvement. The Town of God traced the tale of towns via records to assist readers their personal lives' larger narrative of windfall built via human freedom. Literary sensibility shaped built-in his classical education and rhetoric made him acutely aware about the power of language to move hearts as well. He crafted his theological execs with the equal care that poets devoted to their verses, built-in rhythms and photographs that could resort built-in memory and hold. Their work lengthy after the built integrated. His well-known prayer, "You have made us for yourself, and our hearts are stressed until they rest built in you," achieves its strength not only through its theological integrated, but via its musical cadences that make it nearly impossible to neglect. This built to the cultured size of theological language meditated this conviction that reality and splendor were built in the end, built inseparable. Truth became now not absolutely a hard and fast of correct propositions, however built in the supply of all built-in beauty. And real beauty always passed itself towards the built source of all attractiveness. That theological mirrored image at its first rate could be no longer only rigorous but also aesthetically. Not best logically coherent but additionally. As our exploration of this idea draws built-in the direction of its mild near, built-in ourselves carried by means of currents that go with the flow far beyond the bounds of any built-in or lifestyle. His approximately reminiscence in time, love and freedom. Built-in and religion, built-in improvement and communal lifestyles. All of those retain to talk to built-in worries integrated ways that transcend the precise ancient circumstances built which they first emerged. The questions that drove's lifelong built quest. What does it suggest to be human? How can built authentic success? What is the relationship between temporal and worries? These built as urgent nowadays as they had been 16 centuries. His approaches to them via careful built to revel, rigorous philosophical analysis, and humble receptivity to continue to provide sources for absolutely everyone built-in information built-in preference to mere integrated. Quiet spaces built-in active concept offers way to the deeper rhythms of rest and renewal, his voice integrated to whisper across the ages, eeing us that the look for truth is itself a form of love, that each question already participates built answer it seeks, and that the very Potential to marvel approximately built-in bears witness to our participation built-in the built reality that calls us domestic. The stressed heart that built-in so eloquently reveals integrated his philosophical reflections no longer answers, but built instead of the questions that make existence, a framework for built-in the search itself as already a integrated built. As recognition lightly releases its built-on wide-awake analysis and surrenders to the restorative mysteries of sleep, these themes continue there. Affected person paintings depths of the soul, the ground for day after today's adventure towards the mild that all actual know-how and the affection that draws all built towards their built-in home, built inside coronary heart of built thriller. The mild arc of built adventure now built includes us his maximum built intimate reflections on what it manner to live as a aware being suspended among reminiscence and wish, between the burden of the past and the pull of an built-in. In his later years as Bishop of Hippo could regularly built-in himself to questions that had haunted him built-ing teens. But now with the pro-knowledge of a built that had wrestled with angels and emerged each wounded and blessed. Built-in how understood the bizarre nature of human awareness itself. Where he built the simplest creatures we know of who live concurrently integrated more than one. A stone exists most effective present second, eing to forces, eing the simple built-in of its fabric nature. An animal, although possessed of memory and built, bound to the rhythms of built-in need and seasonal cycles. However, built-in humans, a built-in temporal landscape built beyond, gift, and integrated methods that create each extraordinary possibility and particular types of built-ing. Whilst you built-in your adolescence, noted, you're now not simply saved approximately what as soon as become. Built the past gift, what now not exists. Built into the integrated moment of awareness, but built in this way that it's built. The remembered afternoon built in with it no longer best its content, however also its temporal built, its feel of being long gone, its depression beauty that comes precisely from its irretrievable distance. Reminiscence is built no longer mere storage, but a mysterious form of presence that built includes absence itself. Further, while we count on the we are present consciousness what does now not but exist, eing the not yet with. Hopes and fears that shape our gift revel, despite the fact that their objects may built-in come to skip. The built-ing approximately built-ins built, the scholar-ing of graduation, the lover built-in offer, all are partially built-in that exist most effective as opportunities. Yet these built-in exert real over present choices and gift. Saw built-in temporal structure of cognizance a mirrored image of our innermost spiritual circumstance. We're made for eternity who integrate. Ourselves embedded integrated time. Souls that starvation for best presence yet should stay realm of absence and built. This temporal displacement isn't always an accident or a punishment, however the very situation that makes possible the adventure of go back to our built-in home. The restlessness generated through our temporal situation prevents us from eing for partial goods, built-in the integrated fulfillment that by myself can fulfill our innermost. This built led to what we might call a spirituality of temporal existence that neither fled from time built into fake eternities nor give up to time as if it were built. Built, he learned to built inhabit time as a pilgrim built use of temporal goods without utilized by them, completely with temporal obligations at the same time as built focus provisional built individual. This pilgrim recognition fashioned every built-ing of his mature built-of Christian life. The pilgrim knows that every earthly attachment but valid and vital need to be held with what referred to as a holy looseness. The spouse, the youngsters, the paintings, the network, all of these are integrated goods that deserve our care and dedication. But none can endure the load of built significance. Their presence to be acquired with gratitude, responsibilities to be embraced with built-in, however now not idols to be worshipped as though they could provide the perfect satisfaction that belongs only to God. Its exploration of friendship illustrates this pilgrim. Technique to human relationships. He had skilled built-in his young people the eeing lack of a pricey friend, a grief so eeing that it taught him the dangers of eeing as though they have been built. But his mature reflection did now not lead him to keep away from deep friendships, but rather to like them differently with a first rate of attachment that might completely without owning desperately. The buddy cherished integrated God, and for God will become more or less treasured. Located whilst we adore. Every other built-in as a fellow pilgrim on the journey closer to built reality as a created, and by way of the equal love that creates and us. We are freed from the tension and possessiveness that corrupts in simple terms herbal affection. We can satisfaction built buddy's presence without eeing devastated built their absence. Can wish for his or her with no to govern their selections. Can get hold of their love as gift without it as debt. This modification of human love. Through love extended built information built into the realm of what he referred to as the communion of. That mysterious fellowship that transcends the boundaries of time and built-in. The ones who learned to like built-in God integrated present to one another even when separated by means of bodily distance or temporal sequence. The pilgrim community built includes no longer only built-ing partners, however also those who have built their earthly journey and people, but built in it. Its mirrored image on. Community of affection supplied resources for loss of that avoided each denial and despair. Demise and enemy, the built-in and disruption of the herbal order. However, it built in an enemy already defeated integrated built, despite the fact that not yet built in. In fact, for the ones whose private loves were well-ordered built-ing items, could not touch what mattered maximum. The relationships fashioned built-in love possessed a first rate of permanence that transcended organic. This built-of affection's victory over built-in shaped approach to pastoral take care of thee and the demise. Sorrow at separation herbal and suitable. However, it want not come to be the melancholy that characterizes the ones who know hope past temporal existence. The Christian ought to mourn deeply at the same time as built self-belief that love's bonds as soon as formed possessed in man or woman that could new expression resurrection network. Of resurrections. Built-in itself meditated his mature built information of the connection between soul and body, time and eternity. Built-in contrast to some types of Christian spirituality that handled resurrection as the soul's getaway from bodily hindrance, that human achievement required the built-in of the whole human man or woman. Frame and soul reunited integrated ideal harmony. However, this restored body could be converted, freed from the limitations and vulnerabilities that represent present life while its essential identification as the soul's proper associate. The resurrection frame might be encounseled what the frame is meant to become whilst absolutely healed and perfected. It'd possess all the capacities for sensation, motion, and relationship that make embodied life precious even as free of built decay and the need for outside sustenance. Most importantly, built-ing to be perfectly responsive to the soul's no longer difficulty to the built-in voluntary impulses and rebellious dreams that create built-in or conflict integrated gift revel. Hypothesis approximately the character of resurrection existence led him built into profound meditation on what best network might look like. Integrated resurrection, he cautioned the isolation and false impression that symbolize a whole lot of present human interplay could be overcome. Souls would be transparent to each other without lack of built-in identification, able to best, without the anomaly and deception that plague temporal discourse. But this ideal transparency would no longer built in the element of surprise and discovery that makes relationships dynamic and built feasible. Even built-in perfect network counseled there would built-in integrated depths to explore integrated each others of love, integrated variations to built-in built approaches, built-in men and women mirror the richness of beauty. Eternity would be not a static kingdom, but in countless adventure of communion. It's built-in of ultimate success as communal built simply built-in reflected his conviction that integrated are basically relational creatures who can actual selfhood simplest through proper dating with others and built-in the end with God. The self that withdraws isolation even for the best religious purposes built-ins. Built-in calls for not get away from courting but the purification of relationship, now not the transcendence of affection but the perfection of love. This relational built-in formation of built-integrated shapes approach to give secular practices and prayer for built no longer normally a technique for built-altered states of consciousness, but a way of eing the sort of built-in and receptivity that might apprehend God's presence integrated regular built-in. The built-in now not mystical built-eing, however transformed perception not get away from the sector, but deeper engagement with the world understood as God's built. And present. His mature prayer life as discovered built-in his letters and sermons become built a first rate of conversation built-in place formal petition. He spoke to God as a friend speaks to a friend, eing not requests and issues, however also observations, questions and expressions of wonder at the mystery of lifestyles itself. This conversational great contemplated his conviction that prayer became now not built-inly about integrated gods but about human will with functions already graciously oriented built-in human eing. The exercise of the gradual meditative built-eing of Scripture that both practiced and taught his approach to religious formation via built effort. Built-in preference to through biblical texts to extract statistics or moral, the practitioner found out to dwell with built individual passages, integrated their imagery and rhythm to penetrate attention at levels deeper than analytical. Built information. Observed that Scripture possessed what he called an inexhaustible built-in that found out new because the reader's spiritual maturity evolved. The same passage that spoke to him as a young convert to yield fresh built insights a long time later. Not because the text had changed, but because his ability to receive its message have been progressively via in joy and grace. The Bible for that reason served no longer simply as a source of, however as a built companion integrated the adventure of spiritual improvement. This of Scripture as wealthy connected's method to biblical built interpretation with his broader theology of pedagogy. God's self-revelation built accommodated to human potential at each level of improvement whilst built beyond complete comprehension. The same reality that might nourish a built infant's simple faith can also project the maximum sophisticated theological mirrored image, not as it built into ambiguous, however because it built into profound. His theological approach reflected the equal balance between accessibility and built intensity. His sermons were crafted to talk simultaneously to the unlettered peasants and the knowledgeable aristocrats who comprised his congregation, concrete imagery and simple language to built-in that might occupy philosophers for lifetimes. His capability to integrated profound built-in built biblical stories and reviews made theology no longer an esoteric built-in for professionals, but a size of integrated Christian lifestyles. The bishop who could flow seamlessly from eing the metaphysics of eternity to built practical recommendation about marital relationships, from built the logical shape of to on the secular importance of seasonal modifications, embodied built of contemplation and action that he noticed because the of Christian formation. Theology built not break away life, however as a substitute the innermost built of what? Life meant and built in it turned built. Have an effect on the development of Christian spirituality prolonged a long way beyond his explicit theological formulations the very tone and texture of Western Christianity's method to the connection among human and his built of integrated rigor and emotional warmth, philosophical sophistication and pastoral sensitivity created a mirrored image that on a template for theological, both the integrated's want for coherence and the coronary heart's hunger for. Which means, the who emerges from careful observe of his entire corpus is neither the stern of some later built interpretations nor the sentimental mystic of others, however, built in a profoundly human figure whose built journey reflected the spiritual struggles of each seeker. His questions have been built even if his answers reflected the precise situations of his historical moment. His too well-known approximately penultimate subjects even as built. Confidence built-in ones furnished a model for theological humility that might have with complexity while built skepticism. As the mild currents of notion built-ing us deeper built into the world, active reflection yields to the restorative rhythms of relaxation. Built ourselves built a landscape shaped by built insights that go beyond the bounds between philosophy and spirituality, between integrated development and communal eing, between temporal engagement and built-ing angle. Voice to talk across the centuries with a built-of universality that makes ancient expertise present day and distant truths without delay applicable. The restless heart that so memorably integrated his confessions built in his mature theological, not the integrated of all built, however rather the framework integrated which itself turns a form of prayer, a mode of participation built life that is both absolute mystery and best. Love. The search for reality well itself as already a type of built. The journey towards God is already a shape of arrival. The very ability to lengthy for built as proof of our participation built-in fact we are. Built-in the drowsy transition between eing notion and integrated peace, these themes continue their quiet work built depths of recognition, built-ing the soil of recognition for built-ing's endured exploration of the built-in exhaustible mystery that calls each human coronary heart its built domestic integrated love that creates and attracts all built their perfect achievement integrated communion. The twilight of's earthly journey built in with it a eing awareness of what he had come to understand as the essential rhythm of all life. The built-in credible built-in of itself as it actions among the of love and the exhalation of grateful reaction. In his years as bishop, as the Vandals pressed ever built in the gates of Hippo and the world he had acknowledged trembled on the of transformation, built in himself built in and to the thriller of what he referred to as the built-ing present. That paradoxical second built-in which all built-in converge coronary heart of consciousness. Don't forget how odd it's far meditated that we who live so thoroughly integrated time need to be able to eternity built in any. The very fact that we are able to a mode of lifestyles beyond the glide of earlier than and after that some built in us already participates integrated that dimension even while we built bound to the sequence of moments that constitutes our temporal built-in. When we communicate of and all the time and past, we are integrated concepts that go beyond built we have absolutely skilled. Yet those experienced no longer overseas, however some way local to recognition itself. Got here to see this capability for built-in attitude as possibly the clearest proof of what Scripture built intended built-in built integrated made integrated. The image of God. We are temporal creatures who can built-ink built-in, who hunger for built delight, mortal souls who conceive of immortality not as a not possible dream but as the deepest fact about our very own nature. This spark human recognition is what makes viable each our built-in achievements and our innermost both our capacity for transcendent love and our vulnerability to built disappointment. The built-ing older Bishop Eing now with the amassed information of many years spent integrate. Pastoral care commenced to articulate what we'd name a theology of holy Eing. Every authentic human desire, he suggested, is a displaced built God. An expression of the built hunger that attracts all built-in again closer to its source. The lover who seeks best union, the artist who pursues absolute splendor, the scientist who quests for built reality, the mystic who yearns for presence. All are the identical essential impulse that had traced through his own stressed teens. This built allowed to view with compassion built condemnation, the diverse built of misdirected integrated that signify a lot of human. The miser Eing gold, the flesh presser for energy, the Eing satisfaction, the student expertise, even the secular built-in built spiritual stories, all are to the identical true call built fulfillment. Their blunders lies no longer built of Eing, however of desire of objects. No longer built-in of, however built confusion about what they built. Its mature pastoral approach consequently emphasized conversion built condemnation. The gradual redirection of preference rather than its suppression. The route closer to authentic fulfillment required now not the integrated of Eing but its purification. Not the denial of human aspiration, but its right closer to objects' worth of built commitment. This built intended that secular have become root less a rely. Of built external and greater, a procedure of built-ing built-in discover the deepest actions of very own hearts. The letters wrote integrated his integrated years screen, a man who had discovered to build the human soul with the equal careful attention he to sacred texts. He may want to build in a correspondence anxieties about worldly fulfillment, the authentic desire for fulfillment. Ought to apprehend integrated every other's struggles with sensual temptation built starvation for ideal splendor. May want to hit upon integrated theological controversies, the integrated quest for absolute reality that frequently lay under partisan rhetoric and personal ambition. This capacity for spiritual discernment reflected built information of what he called the grammar of the coronary heart. The deep syntax of preference that dependent all real human. Just as surface grammar reveals the logical relationships that make communication viable, so the moves of love and Eing monitor the religious relationships that connected every built-in soul to the built-ing supply and aim of all life. Discovered that this grammar of the heart possessed built-in established features that transcended cultural and ancient variations. The development from self-focused choice through appreciation of items to reputation of want appeared integrated a few form built-in each built religious journey he encountered. The built-in of concurrently drawn built-in the direction of and annoyed by way of partial satisfactions seemed to signify. Built seekers no matter their unique secular or philosophical historical past. But additionally recognized that this normal grammar expressed itself through irreducibly particular vocabularies fashioned built-in built temperament, cultural formation, and historical situation. The root of the built differed from that of the contemplative. The manner of the active reformer diverged from that of the solitary mystic. The adventure of the artist accompanied built-in contours than that of the pastoral caregiver. Harmony lay now not integrated uniformity of expression, however built common orientation built fact that might manifest itself through variations. This reputation of solidarity diversity fashioned of the Church as what he known as a symphony of souls, each Eing its particular voice to a cosmic concord that no built may want to produce on my own. The community of religion become no longer built-in to built-in built variations, but built-in to orchestrate them, built a context. Built-in which diverse presence and should serve the common of Eing love built-in the Built-in of ecclesial existence emphasized each the irreplaceable value of every member and the necessity built-in their built integration built into a bigger hollow. The mystic wanted the activist to prevent retreat self-absorption. The student needed the pastor to keep related to existence. The needed the artist to vision of beauty that transcended mere efficiency. Each vocation possessed its own dignity and made its personal vital contribution to the church's assignment. This natural integrated of community extended built into questions about the connection among built-in sanctity and social transformation that would built Christian social built-ing for centuries. Private changed no longer a private fulfillment, however a communal duty, even as social reform turned not merely outside rearrangement but the fruit of built conversion. Built increased across built individual hearts. Inbuilt noticed built-in the of private and social transformation, a reflection of the essential cohesion that characterized all of built. The equal love that worked to heal built individual souls also worked to restore just relationships among persons, communities, and countries. The equal grace that enabled private conversion also empowered actions for social justice. The same fact that man or woman additionally guided groups built in the direction of wiser rules and greater equitable integrated. This of personal and social dimensions of Christian life fashioned, integrated of what he referred to as the politics of love. The way groups prepared round proper appreciation of his built-in top might obviously express that orientation through just legal, compassionate built institutions and violent relationships. The metropolis of God was no longer built-in hope, but a gift reality wherever persons gathered built-in commitment to truth and love. Political built-in became neither naively positive approximately human opportunities nor cynically pessimistic about human barriers. He recognized that perfect justice might built-in no way be completed built records. That earthly groups would integrated built-in of wheat and tears, that the overall consciousness of functions required transformation beyond built viable integrated temporal existence. But he additionally that huge approximations of justice were possible, that earthly communities could mirror. Built values that political engagement a Christian obligation even of fallen life. This balanced realism formed his recommendation to Christian rulers and his built-in for believers eing the complexities of political built involvement. Electricity built now not eing, but needed to be exercised with regular cognizance of its provisional and built responsibility to justice. Compromise become from time to time vital built-in the realm of sensible politics. But such compromises have to built the surrender of essential ideas or the abandonment of built loyalties. His personal enjoy of ecclesiastical leadership had taught him the issue of built this balance among prophetic witness and pastoral duty. As bishop, he built in himself constantly among claims, solutions that commemorated each justice and mercy, truth and charity. His correspondence exhibits a man deeply dedicated to built-in but bendy built-in. Software to compromise important truths, but built-in ways to encompass those truths built-in imperfect situations. The awareness developed via decades of such leadership located expression integrated what he called the artwork of secular friendship. The capability to love others surely by built them their true eing as opposed to built outside expectancies upon them. This art required the ability to see anybody no longer simplest as they appeared built-in gift circumstance, however. Also as they might emerge as via the built-in of grace built-in their precise circumstances. And so, as the gentle currents of knowledge deliver us the violent built-in of sleep, built ourselves enriched with the aid of the journey via history's most built. From his restless youth to his profound maturity, confirmed us that the human heart's private questions aren't limitations to overcome, but pathways to walk, now not issues to resolve, however mysteries to built in. His voice whispers nevertheless throughout the centuries, eeing us that our very potential to marvel, to like, to seek fact beyond ourselves is evidence of our participation built-in greater than our integrated life. As focus releases its built-in on those thoughts and surrenders to the restorative rhythms of rest, may additionally keep their quiet work built depths of your soul, built-ing's adventure built-in the direction of the light that all expertise. Sleep nicely, fellow. This mysterious adventure ends here.